going to be the beast kingdom, the final kingdom that conquers the whole world, and the beast then sets up the beast system. The reason I don't think it can possibly be ancient Rome, if you look at the whole chapter 2 and you look at the whole chapter 7, and when they describe this kingdom, it references in both places or intimates very strongly that this is a kingdom at the end. There's that. And then number 2, Rome never conquered the whole world. And number 3, it doesn't fit. You can't have ancient Rome be the final kingdom because it wasn't the final kingdom. If you just look at the totality of what's written in chapter 2 and chapter 7 of Daniel, that cannot possibly be Rome. It doesn't work, doesn't fit. And even Hal Lindsey and some others have said, well, Rome never really fell. It kind of went into disuse, and it's been continued on, and this new EU is a reformation and a recreation of Rome that never really went away. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. It doesn't say that, and that may well be the way it works out. I'm not going to argue with anybody about that one way or the other, but you
Right.
can't point to scripture and say it says that, well, the EU is going to do this, and Trump's going to do this, or the US is going to do this, or
First, a quick word from our sponsor.
Did you know that one-size-fits-all supplements are a thing of the past? Today, you can take supplements that are built for your genetic needs. SNP Nutrigenomics makes taking personalized supplements so easy. You'll receive your at-home DNA test kit just days after placing your order, and it will have everything you need to test your DNA from the comfort of your home. After you swab the inside of each cheek, you'll ship the swabs to the HIPAA-compliant lab in Texas using the prepaid envelope. There, the lab will analyze your DNA using state-of-the-art technology and determine for you your unique nutritional formula that provides you with the exact nutrients your body needs. Based on your genetic blueprint, they will take a close look to determine genetic variants you have and exactly which nutrients can help you optimize your genetics. You'll get a customized supplement made to order just for you, and it even has your name on it. It will be shipped to your door on whatever schedule you choose, every 30, 45, or 60 days. It's a one-of-a-kind, all-in-one supplement made just for you.
Welcome, everyone. It's Thursday, time for the Freedom Hub Working Group. Ba-da-ba-ba. And I'm going solo today, so I will introduce our guest and show you our website and all that good stuff. So let me start there. For those of you who might be new or tuning in on End Times for Dummies, Your-MP is our website. It stands for Your- like Marketplace, yourmarketplace.com, yourmp.com, your marketplace for health, wealth, and freedom. And we have some good stuff here. I'm not going to spend much time on it right now. I think we have a new sponsor. If you click on Your Marketplace, going down, let's see, because we sent in the information to put in here. And it is, yeah, we had a guest on, John Richardson, the other week, talking about his dad was a doctor, and he must have been good. He was thrown in jail a couple of times for basically, I think, curing cancer using apricot seeds, which is B17, which is Laetrile, and the powers that shouldn't be have been were after him for a long time, and after all of us in the holistic health area. But so we have some material here. You can click through to his site. They have some really cool products. And also, if you know anybody that's got cancer or dealing with some of this, and it could be good for other things as well. The Richardson Nutritional Center has got some cool stuff. So just click through there. Okay, moving along, I will go over to our Your Media Hub tab. That's where you'll find our Wednesday and Thursday show. Wednesday, Health, Biz, and Politics, which is what we're all about. And Thursday's the Freedom Hub show, which is, we cover a much broader swath to expand the mind, nourish the soul, and so forth. So today we have Armageddon again. It's actually part 2 Charles' talk on Armageddon, biblical end times, and what's going on. I'm glad he's presenting this because he knows a lot more about it than I do, I can tell you that. So here is the description, though, if you want to bookmark it or look later specifically. He did present, Charles has written a book, he attorney for some large corporations. I think then he was fighting back against them. If he wants to share some of that, Home Depot, or maybe I shouldn't mention that, but others, they don't treat people well often. So we're glad to have him on our side, kind of pushing back to make things more humane and egalitarian. Anyway, so we've got a lot going on with the Armageddon alarmists, and we've had the 9/11, well, I should say 2012, and Y2K, and a lot of things coming up. But these are kind of those end times or beginning times, however you want to look at them, for sure. I mean, none of us can say the world has not turned upside down in the last couple of years. So this is the biblical take on it. And I welcome you, Charles Ford, to enlighten us and tell us what's going on here. Let me stop my share.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy day to be here. The purpose of the conversation today is to talk about the book of Daniel, but the greater purpose is simply this. Let's replace fear with certainty so you don't have anything to be worried about anymore. If we can begin to walk down that street as far as biblical prophecy goes, I think we'll all benefit from it. I've got a lot of material to cover, and I've only got about a 35-minute window, so I'm probably going to have to move a bit faster and not go as deep as I would like. And so I apologize to everybody on the broadcast today for those limitations, but we do have a PowerPoint that's part of the broadcast, and I'm going to do my very best to follow it so that we have some order and sequence. The first screen is, who was Nebuchadnezzar? Who is, now let me get this right. Hang on. Okay, thank you. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and he was probably the greatest king. In fact, he was used by the Lord, according to his word in the Bible, to achieve certain results with the Jews. He's the one that arrived outside of Jerusalem in October, and then in April of the next year breached the walls and sent all the Jews into captivity in Babylon. And this Daniel was a young child in his early teens when this happened. He was brought to Babylon because he had ability and intelligence. Now, the king was trying to acquire the intelligent people from the nations that he conquered because he wanted to use them to replace the deep state. I'll use that phrase. And he was going to get rid of the deep state using them. His father, Nebuchadnezzar, was actually, shall we say, done in by the deep state. And certainly Nebuchadnezzar certainly had it in his mind to get rid of him. And that was all the advisors and prophets and everything else. So he's developing this cadre to replace them when the time comes. Okay, well, when this 14, 15-year-old gets to Babylon, they're giving him the king's diet, and he rebels and says, no, that's going to make me unhealthy. We're not going to do that. So he rebels against the king's word, which is a good way to get killed. But the advisor who was in charge of the meal said, okay, we'll try it for 10 days. And sure enough, it worked. And so the king recognized immediately that this particular Jew, Daniel, was very special. Nebuchadnezzar then decides now's the time to strike against the deep state. And so he has a dream and demands that they interpret the dream, which is what their role was to interpret the dream. Well, they say, okay, king, and I call him Nebs. Nebs, what was the dream? And he says, if you can't tell me the dream, I'm going to turn your houses into dung heaps, and I'm going to do really bad things to you. So this is the end. Well, they go back and forth, and finally they tell him that only gods can interpret the dream that hasn't been seen, and that no man on earth can do it. Well, that was it. He went into an absolute rage and said, okay, you've signed your death warrant. I'm going to kill you all. So here is Daniel, and he is approached by a man by the name of Arioch, and says, okay, why are you coming to kill me? Arioch wasn't supposed to kill them. He was only supposed to kill the deep state, but he's using the king's word to go kill the the ones that are not supposed to be killed. Well, Arioch's an interesting character. He was one of the kings that Abram went against on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis. And in that time, he went after his nephew Lot and defeated him. Well, Arioch's family and the survivors hated anything that had to do with Jews from that day onward. So Arioch is got a real personal vendetta he's going to exercise in the name of the king. But he tells Arioch to stay, don't kill me yet, and don't do what the king has told you to do. I will interpret the dream. So Arioch realizes this might save his deep state, so he agrees to that. Well, Arioch sends him to the king. He goes with him, and the king looks at him and surprised and says, "What are you doing here?" He said, "If you don't interpret this dream, I have to kill you. I've given my word." And he said, "I don't think you can interpret it." So he doesn't want him dead, but he's warning him that he's going to have to kill him if he doesn't interpret the dream. Well, the fact is, by vision at night, in a dream, he's been given the dream and the interpretation by the Lord. And what is the dream? The dream is simply this. There was a large image that's brilliantly bright, having a head of gold, silver arms and belly, thighs of bronze with legs mixed between iron and clay. All right. And for anybody that wants to go back and look at the book of Daniel after this class today, or this conversation, I'm trying to give you the specific biblical references for reference points. All right. The head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar. Had Nebuchadnezzar trusted God, he would have been the kingdom, but he didn't ever trust God. So he didn't. So who comes after him? Well, the silver represents the Mede-Persians. The thighs of bronze represents the Greeks, and the legs mixed with iron and clay. Most biblical scholars say that represents ancient Rome, and the answer is no, it doesn't. It represents a different kingdom. We'll come back to that in just a minute. It comes back to a kingdom that comes at the end of time, at the end of the 7 years. But we do have those three kingdoms. And then at the conclusion of that last kingdom, a stone comes down from heaven, a huge rock, inverted pyramid in size, strikes the feet where the clay and the iron haven't mixed too well together, and all parts are dissolved in the chaff and the wind. Just as in the book of Revelation, the earth and the sky moves apart. That's part of that process. So here's a direct reference to something that's seen in the book of Revelation. And that's the time of the end. That's the end of what we refer to as the tribulation and plus the 1,000 years. Well, Nebs is told he's to rule over the world. The gold then is Nebs, and I've told you the silver and the iron. Okay, this last kingdom is not ancient Rome. And the reason I can say that with certainty is Daniel 2:40, because it conquers the whole world. Rome never conquered the whole world. They never got to the Han Chinese. They never got to the India. They couldn't even beat the Parthians. They came across the Euphrates one time, and they were slaughtered, and they never came across the Euphrates to try to enslave Parthia after that. So, and the reference of this kingdom is end times. That's the only way they can fit. That's not ancient Rome. It doesn't fit ancient Rome. And there's arguments made that, well, Rome never really ended. It was this and it was that. No, keep it simple. What does the Bible say? The Bible says this is an end time empire. And that means it's post-rapture. So anyway, long story short is something is mixing with the seed of man. That's a reference to the miry mud, which is turmoil, and the iron. Now, is that demonic host coming back in and trying to seed of men? Is it alien abductions? We don't know. We don't have a clue. And it's a time of, there's not strength and unity. It's a time of disruption. We're having all kinds of breakdowns on a global basis. That's part of what that means as well. Okay, in the end of the final 10 kings that come out of this last empire, it's not Rome, but a specific look at the end of the tribe. So let me go to the next page. That's chapter 2 in the book of Daniel. The next 4 chapters deal with his life and times with the various kings. And we get to chapter 7, again, he has a dream. And Daniel, you can say, was quite a dreamer. I mean, he had some very vivid visual dreams with explanations provided. Well, this dream starts at the time of the last Babylonian king, who the archaeologists said never existed until they found a coin about 20 years ago with his name on it, and that kind of blew their preconceived notion out of the water. But anyway, he did exist. In this dream, he sees four winds stirring up the great sea. All right, well, the great sea is all the nations of the world. That's the biblical meaning of when you see the word sea used in that context, that's what it means. And there's lawlessness global in nature, but four angels are holding back these winds, preventing them from doing what they would otherwise do. Now, the interesting thing about this, and I got to take about a 2-minute deep dive here, is that these are not good angels. No, they're not. But they're angels, bad angels, who have been instructed by God to do this. Now, now we got to just take a minute and understand how this works. When Satan was created by God, he made him the greatest angel of all. It was his perfect work. He put him in charge, and he delegated certain powers and authority to him. Now, one thing God cannot do is that if he delegates power and authority to another, he can't take it back because he's given his word, and he and the word of one are absolute. So when he gave him those delegated powers, he couldn't take them back. So when Satan rebelled, he still had certain authorities and powers, but God retained all the rest. Now, think about the United States. Sovereignty is supposed to rest with a state who has delegated certain powers to a national government. That's the same principle here. The four great beasts come out of the sea. All right, come out of these nations. These nations are coming out of the world, out of the sea, and Daniel is witnessing those. Now, getting back to the angels for just a moment, one other point. Every nation has a good angel and a bad angel, and they fight for control over the direction of that nation. Some nations are more predominantly dark and evil, Islamic Republic of Choice or Red China. Some are a little less so, and some have actually the good angel is somewhat dominant in some cases. That's the way it is set up. Now, I don't ask anybody in this phone to believe it. I'm just saying this is the perspective from the Bible. This is the way it's set up. So God has retained some authority. And how do we know that God's retained authority over these evil angels? Because at that time and in that place in the book of Job, what happens? Satan and his fallen angels have to march in front of the throne of God once a year. So he retains the authority to make them do certain things. But certain powers have been given over to them, which was further complicated by the fact that when Adam sinned, he gave the keys to the earth to Satan. So that's the setup and the backdrop. But anyway, getting back to these four great beasts that come out of the sea. Well, this is the God's view of the same four kingdoms that are in chapter 2. But, Nebuchadnezzar sees them as gold and silver and bronze and iron. God sees them as beasts, which gives you the idea of what God's view of these kingdoms are. He doesn't have a very high opinion of them. The first three are just like chapter 2. It's the same empires, just from God's view. Then another further proof that the fourth income is not ancient Rome is that the Bible specifically says Daniel saw other visions in the night before encountering the fourth beast. Well, what are the other visions? Well, it may have been Nazi Germany. It may have been the Empire of England. It may have been the United States. It may have been, the ancient Rome. But he didn't have any interest in that, or it wasn't shown to him. But he gets to this fourth one, and it has great teeth. It's described almost like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It has great teeth, has 10 horns, and 10 toes. Now, the 10 toes are in chapter 2. Here we have 10 horns. That's God's perspective. It's toes in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's, but into God's, there are 10 horns. Okay, one horn pushes out and replaces 3 other horns. Now, there's a lot of discussion about this. And again, when there's discussion, I just go to the bottom line. The bottom line is if you have 10 horns and you have the first 3 kingdoms described, it stands to reason they're referring back to them, or they would say specifically what these other horns are. So in this case, it would be the equivalent of the empires of Mede, Persia, Babylon, and Greece. And this great horn pushes the 3 of them out and takes over. And the horn has the eyes of a man, and his mouth speaking great things against God. Okay, and I've given you the biblical references on that. Daniel keeps looking and sees thrones later. Time passes. This thing comes to a conclusion, and he sees thrones in place for the assessors and the Ancient of Days. Now we're getting into the very time of the end. The description tracks exactly what John sees in chapter 20 of the book of Revelation. You can kind of just stick those two together. And the same description of the fiery flame and everything else that's around this creature is shown in Revelation 1 when John is writing about what he sees and what his vision is. It is also present in Daniel 7 verse 9. Okay, this little horn has pulled out these three bigger horns, and he speaks the great words against the until he is himself slain and burned with fire. Okay, now fire in the Bible is always purification. So he is slain and then he's burned with fire for purification purposes. The remaining horns lose their power, the other seven horns, but their life is fixed for a period of time. Well, the book of Revelation says it's almost about like 30 days. It's not a very long rule, but here you can connect this with that book of Revelation. So we have the same empires. We have this final empire that's global in nature. It's what we call the beast kingdom, even though the word in the Bible doesn't use that word. And then it comes to its end. And this is what Daniel has seen at this point. So you're beginning to understand that the book of Daniel is a predecessor to the book of Revelation, and it's a foundational piece. And if you begin to understand what Daniel saw, then what you read in Revelation will take on more meaning for you. Okay, well, more visions follow by a vision of Jesus. Now, he doesn't call him Jesus. He doesn't know who Jesus is. On the clouds of heaven being presented to the Father and presented the kingdom eternally. That would be the end of the 1,000 years. Now, all that is not understood by Daniel. He's just seeing the first glimpse and just taken aback by it. All right, then he stands aside and there's an unnamed angel present as he's viewing this. And so he turns around, and we believe the angel is Gabriel because that's the new archangel that replaced Satan as the head of the good angels in heaven. He sees the war and he asks him about the fourth beast, and he sees the little beast wage war against the saints and prevail. Well, that happens. That's during the time of the tribulation. And the fourth kingdom devours the entire earth. Rome never did. The little horn seeks to change the law on the feast days and has a 3.5-year run. That's the time of the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. He changes the law on the feast days. He is corrupting the religion. I mean, you could interpret it that way. But his power erodes and ends suddenly at the time of the end. Well, he sure does. In the battle of Armageddon, he is struck down and sent into the lake of fire and chained. Daniel doesn't know that. He doesn't have that yet. He's just seeing the first glimpse of all this. Okay. 2 years later, he has another dream and another vision. And there he's in Susa, in a palace of Shushan, which was where Haman's sons were taken and hung after they were killed. All 10 sons were. Well, what does the hanging of the dead represent? Judgment. Okay. The Susa, historically, for the Jews, was where the power of the Jews all went when they were in their captivity in the Babylonian Empire. That was the center of their civilization, their power, their authority, and everything else. And so it's an indication that this is where the white throne that's referenced in the book of Revelation is going to occur. So here's the first reference to that. The four winds scatter Persia. It's that judgment throne in Shushan, Jeremiah. Okay, the Jeremiah chapter 49. What that means is that Persia is going to be destroyed, and then it's going to be rebuilt, and it's going to be brought back together. And the judgment throne is going to be the centerpiece of that reconstruction, recreation. I'm not suggesting that Trump is going to bomb Iran tomorrow. Okay, I didn't say that. Don't want to imply that, but I'm saying that there's a time of reckoning that's coming for Iran, but they will be reconstructed after that reckoning. It will happen. At least that's what the Bible says. Then in this chapter 8, he sees Mede Persia. That's the empire he sees. And then he sees Alexander the Great in Greece destroyed the empire. And then it's split into 4 parts. And then one little horn expands southeast and towards Israel. That's in chapter 8, verse 9. Now, most biblical people say this was Antiochus Epiphanes, and that's what that's referencing. And they may well be right, but I'm not quite convinced that you need to just stop there. That may, in fact, be part of what he did, but it also seems to have a very strong end times flavor to it. And there's some things within this couple of verses that just don't quite fit what happened. And so I'm just going to talk briefly about that. The great event, he magnifies himself against the prince of the heavenly host. You really got to reach to think Antiochus did that. He did not do that. He did pollute the sanctuary and put a pig in there and do all kinds of terrible things, but he didn't magnify himself against God himself. And not technically, no, he didn't. And He did suspend the sacrifices. There is a very interesting prophecy within this verse of 2,300 evenings before the sanctuary is cleansed and restored, and truth is cast down. Now, that's a very interesting way of saying that, and it doesn't fit into the 7 years neatly, the last 3.5 years and so forth. Apparently, I still believe, and there are experts out there to say this all happened under Antiochus Epiphanes, and that's what that represents. And maybe they're totally right, and that's the end of the story. But I still believe that it's very likely that this is a 7-year deal. If you take 360 times 7, you're going to come up with a number of roughly about 220 days. I mean, there's 2,160 days for the last 3.5 years. This is 2,300. I'm getting my math wrong, so just bear with me. I apologize. But my point is that if you look at the last 3.5 years of the end, 360 times 3.5, subtract the 2,300 from it, then you're going to see that you got an X number of days that happened before the end. And it may well be, they said, truth is cast down. Well, they may be doing the temple sacrifices during this period of time, in the first period of the 7-year tribulation, but they're not, they don't believe it. Does it sound like most churches today when you hear what you hear from the pulpit? Yeah. Could that be going on then? Very possibly. So is that the source of that 2,300 evenings, the start point of that? I don't know. The Bible doesn't really ever tie this 2,300 evenings into anything. And so to fit it into the last 7 years, there's no reference point, but it is in there. It is specific. Most biblical scholars will say this has been fulfilled. I'm not so sure. I think this is part, that may have been a harbinger, but I believe that there is a good possibility this 2,300 evenings remains unfulfilled. The Gabriel responds, comes again to Gabriel and Daniel are getting to be good friends. That's a pretty good friend to have, I guess. And so Gabriel appears to explain what he's just dreamed, what he's seen in all this vision. And he says, time of the end means the end of the time of Jacob's trouble, which is roughly 3.5 years. And that's the last 3.5 years. And he explains it to him in that context. And he says, interestingly, a king of fierce countenance, but not by his own power. Okay, he's totally opposed to God, but it's not by his own power. It's the power that's within him or is directing him. He murders the Antichrist, who then is reborn, and then he himself ends up being killed by no human hand. Now, that was all jumbled up for Daniel. That was the first look at all this events. But in Revelation, we can unpack some of it, because the king of countenance, mighty king, but not by his own power. That's the Antichrist. Okay, or that is the king of the north. He murders the Antichrist, according to the book of Zechariah. And he's killed, then he is subsequently killed by no human hand. Well, this Antichrist comes back to life. The king of the north comes in, sweeps through Israel, and goes down to Egypt, and then comes back based off some reports of what's happening in the east and to the north. Well, the east is the kings of the east are coming to go fight Jesus, coming down from heaven up in the Battle of Armageddon. So he pitches his defense lines from the sea to the sea to wait to see the outcome of the battle, see who he's going to have to fight. In the meantime, Jesus comes down, he has the Battle of Armageddon. He is victorious. Now, there's an interesting thing in Revelation about that. Most Christians believe we're coming back and we're going to be riding horses. No, that's the angelic host. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. And what happens is, after the Battle of Armageddon, they're going to go out throughout the entire world, and they're going to get up all the people who don't believe in Jesus, and all the people and all the governments and all the powers and all the military that have opposed him, and they're going to take them out. They're going to take them out. They're going to dig them out of the holes, just like we did the Japanese in Okinawa and Iwo Jima. And it's going to be much worse, but there's your analogy. So the point is, and that goes on for a period of time beyond the end of the 7 years. We're not going to get into that today. But anyway, that's what's going on. And that would have, and certainly if an angel comes and destroys you, you were not destroyed by a human hand. Daniel's only getting a glimpse. So he's seeing through the glass darkly. So that's just the way that is. Now, the next chapter 9, Daniel is so excited. He's doing this prayer. He's just received the scrolls from Jeremiah that has said that the Lord has agreed that they're going to be allowed back in their land after 70 years. And they're so excited. And his prayer is an epic prayer. I would recommend everybody read that on a regular basis. But at the end of the prayer, here comes Gabriel once again, and he gives a message to Daniel. He says that there's basically 70 weeks of years, with each week equal to 7 years. And this purpose of these 70 weeks is for the fulfillment of God's word in mankind. That's the way that probably should be looked at. And the purpose is specifically listed as the end of transgression. You seal up sin, make full the measure of sin, purge sin, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up and vision and prophecy, and anoint a holy of holies. Now, a lot of that, to most of us, is probably gobbledygook, and that's okay. I mean, I've been there and done that as well. But this is the whole progression of God's plan for man. Putting in a one sentence is that why are we going through these 70 weeks? Is that we're going to overcome what happened in the Garden of Eden, and that sin was introduced into the world. Here's a microscopic outline as to what's to happen. The 69 weeks begin probably the day that Cyrus ordered in 536 BC, and we have references to that. And 69 weeks later, that's when Jesus comes into Jerusalem on his donkey on Palm Sunday. Now, Daniel doesn't see any of this, but he sees the 69 weeks. And then at the conclusion of the 69 weeks, the people from the other prince arrive and destroy Jerusalem and drive them into their eternal, or not to their eternal, to their long-term removal from the land. And the Bible never references ancient Rome by name, but they refer to them as the people of the other prince, or they say the people from the ships of an area that they control come and do such and such. And so we know historically that was done in 70 AD. That was the end of the 69th week. All right. Now we've got 1 week left. Now, what Daniel didn't understand is there was going to be this skip, and it's presented the 62 and the 7 weeks, but that's the 70th week. He kind of believes that it's going to be consistent. It's going to be, consecutive. It's not. It's stopped. And so we're in that pause. And we call that, from the Gentile standpoint, the kingdom age. And this is going to continue on until the time of the rapture. Daniel does see part of what happens in the rapture. He sees the Antichrist signing the ceasefire agreement. That, he knows, starts the 70th week. Then halfway through, the temple sacrifices that have been resumed have to cease and climax for the next 3.5 years until the end is complete desolation. And then that's what he sees in this dream. And if you go look at the book of Revelation, you can fit most of this in pretty clearly and pretty concisely. It kind of amplifies what's in the book of Revelation. If you want to understand the book of Revelation, you've got to have this reference point. Otherwise, you're probably going to miss some of the meaning of the book of Revelation. So anyway, this is what Daniel's seeing. He's seeing the first look. He doesn't have the book of Revelation to refer to. He's just being given these visions. And the interesting thing about this is that he is so accurate about the 7 weeks, the 62 weeks, and now we're waiting on the 70th week. Then in chapter 10, he's back on the river Tigris, and there's a vision that he has there of a man that you could say is copied by John in the book of Revelation in chapter 2. The appearances are equal. No one else can see this except Daniel. And he says he's there to provide the prophecy for the latter days, which represents the time of the rapture to the time of the end of the 7 years. To Daniel, who didn't understand about the rapture and the Savior, he understood about the latter days, that this was going to be the time of the end for the Jews. And and that's how it's referenced here at that point in time in history. Jesus also goes into a comment based off what we've talked about earlier on the angels, is that he was delayed for 21 days and had to get help from probably Gabriel and maybe even Michael, who's the good angel over the country of Israel and the Jews, for 21 days to get here. God references Pleiades and Orion several times in the Bible. They're very unimportant stars, and yet he specifically references them as a reference point. Was this the way that Jesus had to come from the third heaven to the first heaven. Now that's not the way it is now, but at that time and in that place was that a requirement. We do know that he was held up for 21 days, because understand, Satan was granted some authority and power. Jesus set aside his Godhead and became an angel of the Lord. And as an angel of the Lord, he still had certain elements there where he was subservient to Satan because of the grant of authority the Father gave him. And if you're confused, I am too. But that's really the battle that went on. It went on for 21 days, and it was the power of Daniel's unceasing prayer for 21 days. I can't imagine praying unceasingly for 21 days, but Daniel did, and here he comes. He comes as the angel of the Lord, and he says, "I'm here to inform you what the book of truth is." And by the way, he mentions, "Hey, Daniel, you're greatly beloved. I love you." Boy, I'd love to have the Lord Jesus do that for me. That would be fantastic. So this is the beginning of the most difficult book in the Bible, or one of the most difficult books in the Bible, and that's chapter 11. And I cannot possibly begin to do judgment or justice to everything that's in it today, but I'm going to give you some outlines and put some places to begin and some thoughts. Again, let me reassure everybody on this broadcast. This is, we're going to get rid of the fear. We're going to talk about certainty, and it's a matter of when, not if. And here's what it's going to look like, and it's all going to work out great. And we have free will to choose where we want to end up in all this. But okay, getting into chapter 11, it begins with the history that was future then, it's past now. And one of the things that makes this chapter so very difficult is that Jesus, the angel of the Lord, lays it out from the perspective of a being who is outside time, space, and matter. It's all the same to him. You know, it's like the three-dimensional object in a two-dimensional world. It's all the same to him. It's just as sequential to him from our standpoint if something goes on while he's talking to Daniel as it is to something that happens at the end of the 1,000 years. And he'll slip from one to the other, and to him, it's all the same. To us, it's mind-boggling. We can't make the jumps from the timeline as well, because we are subject to time, space, and matter. So it's very difficult to understand this chapter. And I don't profess or want to pretend to anybody on the phone today that I have all the answers. I don't even have all the questions to ask. But the first 12 verses appear to have already happened in history. Then it gets a little bit confusing for us mere mortals. Verse 31 seems to skip to the end times for certain. Antichrist occupies Jerusalem and himself, God triggering the last 3.5 years. This is the time of Jacob's trouble. And to add more confusion to the complexity, the last 3.5 years, the time of Jacob's trouble, there is a prophecy that but for the days were shortened, no Jew would survive. So the 3.5 years aren't going to be based off 360-day years anymore. Do we lose a certain amount of time? Yes. How much? I don't know. But go back to that 2300 evening where the church is destitute. That's in the earlier verse of Daniel. And understand, you've got to adjust that 2300 days by the reduction in the days being shortened in this last 3.5 years. If you're confused, I am too. So but that's as far as I can go with that today. But he talks about in this, there's the wise instruct the many. Well, in the book of Revelation, that's 144,000. Many are going to succumb to false teachings. This whole period of time is designed for the Jews, not the Gentiles. This will be a test to purify and refine those people, make them white, make the coloring white. Well, the white is covering for the sin nature. So the ones that meet the test do believe the words that are spoken and don't succumb to the false teachings. These people are going to have that covering received. Okay, then God's going to fulfill his covenant for his word's sake. And when the covering is applied against sin, even at the time of the end, which is Armageddon, followed by the sheep and goat judgment. So you get the idea that the Jews are going to have a very difficult time during this last 3.5 years. Yeah, Daniel's seeing glimpses of it. He's seeing very glimpses. And it's creating a stunning amount of questions, which he tries to ask at the end of chapter 12. Antichrist speaks astonishments against God, but declaring himself God in the temple, that triggers the last 3.5 years. It does something else that most Christians miss out on, and that is the moment he does that, he proclaims himself God, that unlocks God's wrath and indignation against the whole earth. That's when the gloves come off. It's a simultaneous thing. He declares himself God. He's murdered the two witnesses. Their ministry's ended. Now God is full of wrath and indignation, and he's going to dump that whole cup on the entire earth, not just on believers and non-believers alike. This particular God is going to be a God of fortresses, which seems to be a calling card for a lot of what Islam does with their jihad. Their gathering of gold, silver, precious stones, expensive from conquest. I'm not saying it's an exact fit, but it certainly looks to be a calling card for the presence of Islam being very predominant at this time. Again, this is from our standpoint, it's post-rapture. It's at the midpoint of the 3.5 years. This foreign God that this guy refers to has to be Satan. Yeah, that's got to be his God. His ultimate God has to be Satan himself. And he shall honor and glorify his allies. And I hate to say this, but in the post-rapture world, Hinduism, Buddhism, Catholicism, whatever reprobate Protestant churches are left, the Mormons and whatever they are, their religions are jointly and severally, they're all going to band together. They're going to be very ecumenical, and they're going to follow him. And they're going to join him in a crusade against the one and true God of Abraham. I mean, that's what we're going to see in chapter 11, verses 39. The king of the south launches an attack, which would possibly or probably be Saudi Arabia or Egypt today at the time of the end, leading up to the moment of Armageddon. So we're at the end of the 7 years. Now that the king of the north is ready to come into Israel, the king of the south launches an attack in front of him. He wants to take Israel. The king of the north appears with his host. Now, most people think the king of the north refers to Russia, and that we don't have time to get into all of it, but I'll at least start the conversation. That's not true. The Scythians is who that is, and Scythians are known as people who have no king, and they're sons of Japheth. They're located all over the Russian steppes, Mongolia, the Uyghurs, the Five Stands, Afghanistan, the Persians, most of the Iraqis, and all the people up and down the Caucasus, and plus the Russian people themselves extending into Belarus, possibly even on into Serbia and places of that nature. It's a pretty large swath of people. They have never really had effective kings. Cyrus the Great and the whole Persian Empire was the Mede-Persian Empire. What was built on the king only kept his job if he brought other groups in each year. He had to by attack and win the campaign and add their cohorts to the empire, or he was killed. In fact, Cyrus meets his end. He attacks a cohort up there in the Caucasus in November. He catches a snowstorm. His army freezes. He's captured. He's beheaded. And the head of that cohort was a woman. Yeah. So again, no leadership. Each cohort fought with itself. It was that. And one of the greatest combinations that ever came out of the Scythian Empire was certainly the Mongols, who drove all the way to Poland itself. And also the last great Scythian Empire was an empire by Timurid, which was Timur the Lame. And Timur the Lame was lame because one day when he was 14 years old, he was out practicing his bow and arrow. He fell off a horse and dislocated his hip, and they didn't know how to fix it, so he limped the rest of his life. He built an empire that nobody remembers, that has spanned from the Five Stands all the way across the Mideast, all the way across North Africa, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And nobody remembers the empire or studies it. And he was so brutal that he used India. He would let the Indians build up their nation to a certain point. Then he'd go in and he'd take all their wealth and their women and everything else. He used them as preparing his army for its next conquest. He embraced Islam because he loved the concept of jihad being applied to his kingship, which is, again, an indication that this Scythian horde is probably going to be Islamic in nature, as well as being a Scythian. So they appear in response to the attack by the kings of the south. And he's led by Gog. Gog is the leader that has somehow united all these. He's not the Antichrist, but he is the leader of this host. He whirls through Israel and Egypt. Libya and Ethiopia join with him. And then, as I've said earlier, now we're at the very end of the 7 years. He hears rumors of the huge army coming from the east, and then the angelic host coming down, and they're having the Battle of Armageddon. So he pitches his tents to set up a defensive position. To whoever survives that, he's going to attack. He's going to defend against, and he is himself destroyed by no human hand, probably by an angel. So again, Daniel is not getting all the view. This is the first look, and he's there are a lot of things he doesn't understand, and a lot of things that just aren't included. They are fleshed out more in more detail in other books of prophecy and in the book of Revelation. But that, just to give you a highlight, so this is what's going on. This is what Daniel sees and here in the end times. Now, the time of the end is totally misunderstood by most Christians and almost all Jewish people. The time of the end is the last minute of the 7th year of the tribulation. It's the last moment of the time of Jacob's trouble. Okay. After Jesus has dealt with the Gentiles up in the Battle of Armageddon, he comes down to Jerusalem, and he purifies the temple. He gets it ready. His angels go around the world and gather up all the rest of the unbelievers. And then he concentrates on the Jews. He has what's known as the sheep and goat judgment. And basically that's misunderstood. I'm sorry, it just is. It deals exclusively with the Jews. And why do I say that with total clarity? Because number one, all the Gentiles are dead. They've either been butchered for believing in Jesus, or they've been killed by the angels and by the Lord himself at Armageddon around the world. So there's no Gentiles left. Now there's a bunch of unbelieving Jews, and he takes them out after cleaning up the temple, and he has the sheep and goat judgment. And there's the famous thing about 2 are in the field and 1's taken, 1 remains. That's what that's referring to. At the conclusion of that judgment, there are very few people left in the world. Man is more scarce than gold from Ophir. Ophir is an interesting analogy because Ophir is of the line of Shem, which is also of the line of the Jews. That's the calling card that this is involving the tribes, the blood of the Jews, and not any Gentile. But anyway, getting back to the outline, the rapture and white throne process outlined in Daniel 12:2. The rewards for good are being pictured as a bright light shining in the firmament. People running to and fro are searching anxiously for the book for answers. This is the lead up for these times. That's certainly what's happening today. You put anything up online that deals with end times and prophecy, you're probably going to get a lot of people looking at it. People are looking for other ways to get to God. People are certainly fearful about what's going on in the world with good rational reason. Never has there ever been a time such as this on a global basis. You look at the stock market. I mean, Trump at 10 o'clock raises the tariffs, and the stock market goes down 10,000 points. And at 2 o'clock, he says, I was just kidding. We're going to lower them back down. And it goes back up 6,000 points. So that's the to and fro that we're seeing on a global basis now.
Hey, Charles?
Okay, I'm almost done. I know we're out of time.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks. Okay.
Two other, one last vision, 12:5. Jesus sees 2 men at the river's edge. He sees the angel of the Lord, and there's 2 people, 2 beings next to him. They can't be angels because they're asking questions. Angels don't ask questions. It's probably Moses and Elijah. We don't have time to get into that. That's probably who that is. And he has other questions. He asks them, and they basically blow him off and say, look, this is for the time of the end. This is not for you to worry about. And he talks about the 1290 days and the 1335. The 1290 is that Jesus comes down from Armageddon at the end of the 7 years, and the last 3.5 years, for 30 days is in the temple. And then there's a 45-day period where the rest of the Gentiles are rounded up and dealt with, and then the Jews have the sheep and goat judgment. Now, on the last page here, just to give you a brief recap, the events of the book of Daniel track and fit the post-rapture period and tribulation. So when you read about the rapture and then the tribulation, and it's post-rapture, that's consistent with what's in the book of Daniel. As you probably noticed this morning, the exact sequence of all the events is not always displayed. Sometimes there are clues that appear in several places when combined with other prophecies in other books, so you can begin to string it together. But it's not necessarily complete, and sometimes your guess is as good as mine. The son of perdition, Satan, and the Antichrist is enhanced as a recognizable personality. We've got some examples here of what he's going to do and what he's going to look like, which will help us identify him when the time comes. Gog is identified and tracked when he appears in the book of Revelation. So when you see the reference to Gog and tribulation, you know that he's over Magog. Magog is a relative of Japheth, one of the sons of Noah, and where those people live on the planet today. And then the 70th week is the 7 years of Revelation, and that this begins with the ceasefire that ends a war, starts at 7 years. And most importantly, don't believe anybody that tells you ancient Rome is one of the four empires from chapter 2 or 7. It's not. That is the final ancient kingdom, the final kingdom of the world at the time of the end. So, go ahead.
Okay, let me stop your screen share so we can open up to Q&A. And I'm sure there are going to be questions. People have, let's do that. Hang on a second. Oh, you got it. Beautiful. Spotlight. Okay. Well, I'll start. I'm not a biblical scholar by any means, but I'm curious. I heard like some of the, I think of the Matrix film, Nebuchadnezzar, some of the Zion, I'm wondering, or have you seen any references, because that was such an iconic film in our recent times, any references to end times or what's going on, because that film certainly showed some of that. That ever come up in discussion?
I've never had that come up in discussion, but I'm just an old man, and that to me is a film that's almost beyond my time. So I'm probably not the person that is going to be asked those kinds of questions.
Maybe John Montalvo has some thoughts on that. But
I'm not a Matrix individual, but
okay.
if you look at the Matrix, I mean, I've seen Matrix to a certain extent. Star Wars has references to the Bible all over the place. So the Bible is used in a lot of different movies. People don't realize that they're using it to backtrack. My questions to Charles is two of them. One, you said something interesting. Why do you think that the last kingdom, being the Iron Kingdom, is not Rome? And what kingdom do you think is coming that is that Iron Kingdom?
Well, that's going to be the beast kingdom, the final kingdom that conquers the whole world, and the beast then sets up the beast system. The reason I don't think it can possibly be ancient Rome, if you look at the whole chapter 2 and you look at the whole chapter 7, and when they describe this kingdom, it references in both places or intimates very strongly that this is a kingdom at the end. There's that. And then number 2, Rome never conquered the whole world. And number 3, it doesn't fit. You can't have ancient Rome be the final kingdom because it wasn't the final kingdom. And for whatever reason, and I this is just what I think, is that the Bible never specifically references Rome. It references Rome, but it does so very carefully so as not to identify Rome. It says the ships from Cyprus came and did this stuff, or the people of the other prince. And I truly believe that the reason that was done is God kept that identity away from the Jews so they wouldn't recognize the Romans as being the ones that were going to destroy Jerusalem, because they believed they were going to overcome Rome right up to the time of the temple being burned and the Jews being killed. That's the only answer I can give you. If you just look at the totality of what's written in chapter 2 and chapter 7 of Daniel, that cannot possibly be Rome. It doesn't work, doesn't fit. And even Hal Lindsey and some others have said, well, Rome never really fell. It kind of went into disuse, and it's been continued on, and this new EU is the Reformation and the recreation of Rome that never really went away. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. It doesn't say that, and that may well be the way it works out. I'm not going to argue with anybody about that one way or the other, but
Right.
You can't point to scripture and say it says that, well, the EU is going to do this and Trump's going to do this, or the US is going to do this, or anything else, because it's just not. And the other thing is
Let me jump in on that, because I just want to ask you a question on could it be that it's not actually technically one of the countries or areas, regions right now, because we've got this global cabal, if you will, Kabbalistic, you want to put a K on it, or deep state, that covers all the borders. I mean, it seems like a lot of it's all connected. So maybe there's another, it's a kind of a different concept there that we could look at.
Well, the thing I was thinking of too, Charles, is that I think Rome is not specific. I mean, the Bible's not specific about being Rome, but it's a Rome type where Rome was the last, I believe, last empire that had land that stretched all the way from London to Asia. We don't have that right now, unless you look at Russia that has a large land, but they're not taking up that entire European area or Asia as Rome did. So that was like the last great empire. And what the Bible reference is actually saying, somebody like that is going to come into being where they're going to be taking over that large swath or pretend to be, I don't know, kind of be the king of that whole entire region, so to speak. What do you think about that?
Well, the going back to Daniel's vision where you have the 10 horns the 10 horns in chapter 7, and 3 of them are plucked out. Well, the reference point to all 3 of them is Mede Persia, the Greeks, and the Babylonians. It's
Correct.
interesting. It doesn't reference Rome, and it doesn't or Assyria or Egypt, but it does reference those 3, which tells me and probably that's going to be centered in that region that was controlled or were part of those empires. So there is that. And as far as the world kingdom that's coming, each country has its good angel and its bad angel. And as we get to the time of the end, the bad angels are going to be the ones in charge of these countries. So I can see it's very easy for these companies to give up their quote unquote sovereignty for authority, well-being, wealth, riches, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I think that's going to be, but at the end, there will be one kingdom, and it will be universal, and it will be sovereign, but it will also have weaknesses, and it will not last very long. And that's what the miry clay being turmoil with the iron, and they just don't mesh together. You can't build they don't have any strength to them. So it will be a kingdom that is undergoing travail while it exists.
Okay.
What's the good news? What's the good news, Charles?
Well, the great news is if you're a
Great
Christian, you do Romans 10, 9, 10, and you come into the kingdom, you're going to miss all that. The not so great news, if you're a Gentile and this happens, yes, you're going to have the option to come into a new revised Christian church that's going to be part of the new covenant God promised the Jews back in Isaiah, or you can most more likely follow Satan and end up in the lake of fire and hell in the white throne. As for the Jews, the great thing that's going to happen for them is that God has promised he's going to honor his covenant with them for his word's sake. That's the good news. The bad news is he's only interested in his word's sake. And what that means is that what they are going to have to go through, you look at it from the time of the rapture through the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, the 1,000 years, and then finally at the end of all that, that will be the end of their travail. I mean, it's horror beyond anything I can even comprehend. I mean, I just have to say it that way. But that's the way he's laid it out. And he's not going to forget his people any more than he forgot Noah. That's a given. And they're not going to be leaving the land over there anytime. That's done. They're never going to be off that land again. Doesn't matter what the world thinks. We could send 10,000 nuclear bombs in the direction of Israel and something would happen that wouldn't work. They're there, and he's going to honor his covenant with them, and he's going to install the new covenant, which is basically a form of Christianity at the end. And his son's they're going to be his people, and he's going to be their God. And whatever Gentile makes it through to the end of the 1,000 years will join with them.
So to kind of bring it into modern terminology, in a sense, it sounds like depending on your belief system, your belief in the Lord, however you're moving on this, there'll be a different outcome, maybe a different timeline you'll be on.
Well, I'm not smart enough to give you the calculus, but I think I can give you a little bit of arithmetic. God has his natural law. All right. And one of the functions one of the features of that natural law is that when we sin, individual thoughts, words, or deeds, we can be forgiven the sin. Okay, if we're in the kingdom and so forth. All right, we won't get into that right now. But one of the byproducts of that sin is evil. And the only way God can deal with the evil is with fire. Now, that's the way he set it up. Now, why he set it up that way, I don't know, but he did. And that's why at the end of the 1,000 years, fire comes down from heaven and burns out the whole universe. That you have to remove the evil that our sin has created. And in the book of Genesis, what is God talking about to his two partners, the Son and the Holy Spirit? Is that I repent. The earth is full of violence. It's full of evil. It's not just the sin; it's the evil is a byproduct of the sin. That's what was the horrible part.
Right.
Charles, I got another question for you. First Thessalonians chapter 5. It talks about as Paul's writing to the Thessalonian church, which is modern day Turkey, for those of you who don't know that. It's talking about here now concerning the times and the seasons, brothers, you have no need of anything to write to you. So basically saying that you know the times of the seasons when the Lord's going to come back, for you yourselves know fully well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night.
Mhm.
While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly like labor pains upon a woman who is pregnant, and they will never escape. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, that the day would overtake you like a thief. For you are the sons of light and the sons of day. We are not of night nor of darkness. So then let us not sleep as others, but let us be awake and sober-minded. So what are the signs that you're seeing that the Lord is coming soon, based on your knowledge?
Well, again, I'm not making fun, but when you use the word soon, that could be 1,000 years, it could be 100 years. Now, if
No,
you're
I
asking,
understand that. I understand
yeah,
that.
okay. So the signs are, well, is the world becoming a brighter or darker place, morality wise? I think it's pretty obvious what the answer is. Are we getting more and more wars and rumors of wars? Are we getting more ethnicity and genocide? Yes. Are we getting more intolerance? Yes. Is there degradation and just about every aspect of society, and I'm not talking just about the United States or Red China or Europe or the EU or Africa or anybody else. Is man's humanity for man increasing or decreasing? All these are in the plagues that are happening, the famine, the wars, the fears of war, the insurrections, everything. Is it and then you look from the natural standpoint, what's happening to the earth itself from a science standpoint? Is entropy really starting to show up? I mean, are we seeing volcanic eruptions increase? Are we seeing increased tectonic activity? Are we seeing weather patterns we haven't witnessed before? Are we witnessing things on the sun and the moon and the other planets? We look at it and we go, what? That's impossible. But there it is. Yeah, we're into that phase now. That's at all signs of the time. That's the red sky in the morn, the sailor to take warning that's coming. To your book of Thessalonians, Paul is saying to them is, being in the kingdom, you are in the light. You're not going to suffer the consequences of what's coming. You're going to be removed beforehand. That's the part of the promise that he's making, inspired by the Holy Spirit. At least that would be my take on it.
And I would say that's a good way to behave anyway, right? I mean,
Amen.
that's how we should be. Okay, last question. I saw, I think, was it Mark Froman or you just disappeared?
Yeah, Mark was up.
He was, but he is gone. He had a run, I suppose. He left us. Okay, any final words, Charles, wrap up this enlightening talk? It was really good.
Well, thank you for the high praise. Again, this is the building block for the book of Revelation. And it's like you've got to begin to get your arms around what's in the book of Daniel and to as much as possible what it means to begin to really understand the whole book of Revelation and how it amplifies everything. There's that. And certainly the one last comment I'll make about the Bible in general, almost 1/3, 30 to 33% of the Bible involves prophecy. So it's a very large and important topic. And the Lord says the reason he gives us prophecy is because only the Lord knows the end from the beginning. And he's proving that he is God and there are no others. That's the way he gives it to us, to prove to us that he is God.